Luke chapter 22, verses 47 through 54, from the New International Version. While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers, and the temple guard of the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns." Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance.
Jackson did a good job, didn't he? Great job, man. I'll tell you what. If you have your Bibles, open up to Luke 22. Luke chapter 22. Well, we are glad you're here today. If you're visiting, welcome to Westside, and we are honored to have you with us. But Luke chapter 22 is where we're at today. And in our text here, it's about midnight in Gethsemane, and there's so many things that are going on in this chapter. Jesus has been praying alone, and in the distance, the disciples see the flickering lights of torches, and soldiers led by Judas cross the Kidron Valley and approach the garden. And everything happened so quickly. A brief conversation, there was a hurried kiss on the cheek, and soldiers stepped forward to take Jesus. And in the confusion, Peter takes a sword and knows he has to act, and so he grabs a sword and takes a wild swing, and if he hoped to scare off the soldiers, didn't work. If he hoped to inspire the other disciples, it might have worked had Jesus not stepped in. But Jesus steps in, and this high priest servant falls to the ground, screaming in pain. And the soldiers draw their swords, and they're ready to kill Peter. But before things get out of hand, Jesus, and this is really cool. Can you imagine this? Jesus takes the servant's ear and puts it back on and heals the man. Wouldn't you like to have been there to see that? I mean, think about that. He has his ears chopped off, and Jesus takes the ear, puts it back on, and heals the man. It's quite a story, and it made quite an impression on those there because, again, it's recorded in all four Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell the story. John tells us Peter swung the sword, and Malchus was his name. John 18, verse 10. Luke tells us, as Jackson read to us, that Jesus healed his ear. Luke 22, verse 51. And when we think about what happened that night, the betrayal and the arrest of Jesus get all the attention, but the disciples never forgot about what happened to Malchus. They all wrote about it. The early church never forgot as well. You know, we've been spending some time looking at the question, who do you say the Son of Man is? And over the last few weeks, we've been trying to answer the question. He's the coming King. He's the Son of Man. He's the Anointed One. And today we're going to see something else about Jesus. And that is simply this from Luke chapter 22. He heals the hurts of those who come to hurt him. And I think that's pretty fascinating about Jesus. Here's a group of men who are coming to arrest Jesus, coming to take him away. But Jesus stops in the midst of all this chaos, heals the one who came to hurt him. Isn't that cool about Jesus? He came to heal the person who wanted to hurt him. And so Jesus did. And we're going to look at a video here in just a moment of kind of displaying that, of what it might have looked like. And I think we can understand Peter's desire to fight back. I mean, can't you? I mean, the one who you followed, the one who changed your life is being threatened. And so Peter is angry and he's afraid and he's desperate. And when all those kind of kick in and go into motion, Peter lashes out at the nearest target, which happened to be Malchus. And no doubt Peter meant to behead Malchus, but the angle wasn't right, and I'm sure Malchus didn't stand still either. And so he swung the sword, and you can hardly blame the disciples for thinking it's time to fight. We would expect something no less from Peter, the volatile, emotional leader of the disciples, right? And so he does what he does, and he acts first and thinks about it later. And I think Peter did what we all tend to do when we're hurt and scared. And that was he struck out in anger and confusion. And that's what he did. Hit back, make someone pay. So we're going to look at the video here in just a moment, and we're going to see how a follower of Christ reacts when everything seems to be lost. Let's look at the video. A lot of things are going on in that chapter. And one of the questions I think that it answers is, how does a follower of Christ react when everything seems to be lost? What do you do when your dreams seem to disappear into the darkness? And one thing that it points out is, don't give in to impulsive anger. Don't give in to impulsive anger. Is it wrong to be angry? No. Is it a sin to be angry? No. Jesus was angry, wasn't he? I mean, there was times when he got mad. He went into the temple and he cleaned out the temple because they were turning the temple into a place of selling. But Jesus never sinned. So how do we react when everything seems to be lost? When we look at this chapter and we see some things I think that jump out at us, is number one, just don't give in to impulsive anger. Years later, James would write, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for human anger does not accomplish God's desires. Now you just look at that verse for just a moment. Everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How many of you have that down just perfect? Anybody still working on that? I am. It's quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Quick to listen in the sense that you just listen to understand, not listen in the sense of trying to come back, but just listen. To kind of put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. Slow to speak. Slow to become angry. That's the process, right? Slow to anger. Again, that's something we're all working on, I think. You see, human anger and God's righteousness generally move in opposite directions. Human anger tends to kind of go this way, and God's righteousness tends to go this way, right? They just tend to go in opposite directions. A Christian counselor once said this: when you find yourself getting angry, ask yourself this question: what am I afraid of? Most of our anger stems from fear, and most of our fear comes from the perception that we're losing control. As long as we're in the driver's seat and things are going our way, we rarely get angry. But let things spin out of our control, as they did the night in the garden when the soldiers came to arrest Jesus, and fear takes over. And we see that in the story, don't we? Fear taking over. Peter and them are afraid. They're trying to figure out what to do to protect Jesus. Something has to be done. So Peter takes the sword and starts swinging. I remember the verse in Genesis 15, verse 1. God said this to Abram. After the word of the Lord came to Abram in a dream or in a vision, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. That's a great verse. God says, I am your shield, not I will give you a shield, not I have a shield for you to take, but I am your shield, Abram. I am your protector. I am the one who will watch over you. Picture a shield that stretches from head to toe and completely protects the soldier's body. That's the kind of shield that God is. God does not say, I will give you a shield, but I am your shield. Which means we have a shield that is all powerful, eternal, a shield that cannot be defeated, a shield that is as strong as God himself. And to call God our shield means a couple of things. Number one, he protects us in times of doubt. And number two, he rescues us in times of danger. You ever gone through a time when you doubted? You ever gone through a time when you doubted whether God really existed? Have you gone through a time when you doubted that the Bible is the Word of God? Have you ever gone through a time when you doubted that Jesus really is the Son of God? God says, I am your shield. He protects us in times of doubt. How does he protect us? Well, he gives us his word. He puts us in groups where we can visit and pray and talk and study together. And he rescues us in times of danger. You ever been in a time of danger? How does God rescue us from that? Maybe he puts friends there to help us, puts a church there to help us. God, as a shield, protects us in times of doubt and rescues us in times of danger. And to call God that says so much. God is whatever we need whenever we need it. Think about that. Whatever we need, God is. He is the all-sufficient God for every crisis. We cannot have a crisis too big for God. Right? We cannot have a crisis too little for God. We cannot have a crisis that God cares nothing about. Whatever you face, whatever you deal with, God says, I care about that. I am your shield. I am your very great, great reward. You see, it's only a short step from fear to impulsive anger. And from sudden anger comes all manner of evil. Question, has sudden anger reared its ugly head in your life? Do you find yourself becoming angry and saying things you shouldn't say, doing things you shouldn't do, responding in ways you really don't need to respond? Has sudden anger reared its ugly head in your life? Well, we want you to know that one thing we can do for you today is pray with you and for you. Because anger is something I think we all struggle with. Take a message from me, by the way, on that. I'll take it later. But anger rears its head in so many ways. And this week you're going to be faced with some decisions in which anger may rear its head. But just try to remember this, to not give in to impulsive anger. You know, sometimes when you follow Jesus, you have to lose in order to win. And losing is not a popular idea today, right? I mean, how many coaches give pep talks to their team saying, okay, guys, go out there and lose one today, right? Let's go out there and lose today, right? No. How many of you remember Knute Rockne? Remember his famous line? Fill in the blank. Win just one for the Gipper. Remember that? Win just one for the Gipper. George Patton remarked, Americans love a winner. America will not tolerate a loser. Vince Lombardi, Green Bay Packers football coach, said winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. So our society loves winning, right? Our society, our culture worships, in a sense, winning. We all want to be on the winning team, don't we? I mean, whether it's, we're being picked for a baseball team or softball team or whatever kind of team we're being picked for, we want to be on the winning team, right? Winning is just the way we are. Nothing seems more un-American than choosing to lose. But I want you to listen to these verses from Jesus. Listen to what he has to say about his kingdom and his culture. Luke chapter 9, verse 24. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will save it. See how upside down that is from today in our culture? Luke 9, verse 23. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. In that day and age, when you saw a man carrying a cross, you knew he was going to die. Jesus says, carry your cross daily. Pick it up. Matthew 16, verse 26. What good will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, yet loses his own soul? What good will it do if I gain everything the world has to offer, but I lose the most important thing I have? It's not a good trade, is it? And then Mark 9, verse 35. If anyone wants to be first, he must be very last and the servant of all. Wow. Jesus says sometimes when you follow me, you have to lose in order to win. And so Jesus is bringing that out, when we in this chapter as well. That's what Jesus meant when he told Peter, put your sword back in its place, Peter. For he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. So put it back up. Shall I not drink the cup my Father has given me? John chapter 18, verse 11. Jesus knew what he must do. He knew why he was here, right? We can't accomplish God's work by bullying people into submission, can we? It just doesn't work that way. Do you remember what Jesus said in Matthew 26, verse 53? Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? Now, how many angels are 12 legions? I used to read that and go, how many are that? 20, 30, 40? 12 legions, more than 72,000 angels. That's a lot of angels, right? Do you think 72,000 angels could have stopped the group of soldiers that were coming to take Jesus that night in the garden? No problem. I mean, at the resurrection, Roman soldiers trembled from fear and became like dead men before an angel. That was one angel. Shepherds were afraid before one angel who announced the birth of Jesus, Luke chapter 2, verse 9. Now translate that into 72,000 angels. It would have been a mismatch, wouldn't it? 72,000 angels. But if Jesus had that sort of power at his disposal, and he did, why didn't he use it? He wanted to finish what he started. It's really that simple, isn't it? He wanted to finish what he started in the manger. He wanted to finish what he started in his life. And that's what we want to do as well, right? As a church, we want to finish what we've started. As a Christian family, you want to finish what you started. As an individual, you want to finish what you started. You don't want to throw in the towel. You don't want to quit. If you fall and you get back up and you keep going. If you know somebody today who's fallen, help them back up. And help them take the next step, right? We must finish what we've started. The ancient Greeks had a very unique race in their Olympics. The winner wasn't the one who came in first. It was the one who finished with his torch still lit. It's kind of unique, isn't it? Wasn't enough just to finish first, but you must have your torch still lit. And so we want to keep the passion in our hearts burning for him until we are actually with him. Matthew 26, verse 54 says that Jesus refrained from calling on those angels because he knew that his arrest was necessary to fulfill God's plan. Matthew 26, verse 54, Jesus said it must happen this way. It's got to happen this way. So we've got to keep going. We've got to keep moving on. We can't stop. But again, I don't blame Peter for not fully understanding Jesus' words. If I'm in Peter's shoes, I'm going to want to do something too, right? I'm going to want to try to stop this. I'm going to want to help Jesus in some way, somehow. Peter did what he thought he could do. Again, it's late, he's tired, he's confused, he's angry. But in that combination, we always don't do the best, right? Sometimes we make bad choices. Peter wants to do something, anything that will rescue Jesus. But Jesus doesn't need Peter's help. Doesn't want to be rescued. Jesus can take care of himself, right? And what seems to be the cluttered rush of events turns out to be the plan of God unfolding to save the world. So it's really quite a story. Someone said Jesus did not die because he could not help it. He did not suffer because he could not escape. All the soldiers of Pilate's army could not have taken him if he had not been willing to be taken. They could not have hurt a hair of his head if he had not given them permission. End quote. So how does a follower of Christ react when all seems lost? How do you react when everything seems to be lost in your family? How do you react when everything seems to be lost at work? How do you react when everything seems to be lost in your personal life? Number one, don't give in to impulsive anger. And number two, rely upon Jesus' power. Rely upon the power of Jesus. I mean, Jesus in this garden has more power than those soldiers that came to get him. Right? He has more power. Sometimes we just have to let go. And letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean passively sitting by while the world takes advantage of you. It doesn't mean that at all. Letting go means giving up the right to always be in control. Letting go means that you choose not to manipulate others. Letting go means you admit that you don't have all the answers. Letting go means yielding your emotions to the Lord. Could God have turned things out differently for Jesus? Certainly. After all, he's God, right? He can do anything he wants to do. He could have arranged the circumstances any way he chose. But Isaiah 53 verse 10 says this, "Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief." And I read that verse and I think as a dad, I cannot imagine turning over my son. Can you, dads? Can you imagine just turning over your son and saying, do with him as you wish? Hurt him, abuse him, mock him, beat him, do what you have to do to him, and then kill him. Wow. I cannot imagine doing that to my son, can you? But Jesus didn't fight back because he knew without his death, the whole world would be lost. So Jesus endured the beatings. He endured the indignity of the mob, all the false accusations, the brutal beatings, the shame of death on a cross. So how do we as followers of Christ react when everything seems to be lost? Well, we rely upon the power of Jesus because he has all power, right? And then we see in Luke 22, verse 51, that we extend Jesus' love to others who have hurt us. Jesus touched the man's ear and healed him. And again, what a scene that must have been. Can you imagine what it was been like for Malchus? To be sitting there and to see Jesus putting his hand out on his ear and putting the ear back on. Can you imagine that? That's hard to even imagine, isn't it? But Malchus, just wow, this is happening to him. He doesn't know what to think. But Jesus extended love to those who came to hurt him. This man had come to arrest Jesus, yet Jesus heals him. You see, Jesus never turns away anybody when they are in need. When Jesus found suffering, he relieved it. When he found sickness, he healed it. Jesus never turned away a person who was in need and called to him. That says a lot about Jesus, doesn't it? He never turned away a person who called to him and said, help. He never turned that person away. And he will never turn you away when you call to him. And this morning, you need to know that you're loved. You see, Jesus did what only the Son of God can do. He healed the one who came to hurt him. And he does that today, doesn't he? When Jesus moves to the cross, he heals us. He takes our sins upon him and heals us. So it's really a powerful scene about Jesus. See, Jesus was always in charge even in the darkness of that night, wasn't he? May not have seemed to be, may have seemed to be the soldiers were in charge and Jesus was just dragged along. But Jesus would go while the disciples run and Peter would follow at a distance. But Jesus' hands are bound and guarded as if he were a common criminal. And in less than 12 hours, Jesus will be hanging on a cross. But as he goes, one man rubs the side of his head and remembers that Jesus touched him and healed him. And I wonder what happened to Malchus, don't you? Do you ever wonder if he became a believer? Do you ever wonder whatever happened to Malchus? Maybe he didn't. The Bible doesn't say. This happens to be the last miracle of bodily cure that Jesus ever did. It was the small miracle, if you will, on the way to the big miracle, the cross. And it reveals to us the heart of Jesus. So as we close today, we see again that Jesus heals the one who came to hurt him. And Jesus can heal you. Whatever you're dealing with. Whatever's broken in your life. Whatever's not working in your life. whatever pain you have, whatever sorrow you're dealing with, Jesus can help you to get through that. As the old saying goes, if he leads you to it, he'll lead you through it. And Jesus can do that. He has the power to heal the person who comes to hurt him. And that says a lot about Jesus, doesn't it? So today, what's hurting you? What are you dealing with? What are you facing? What decisions, what choices are you having to make this week? Are you ready to turn them over to God? Are you ready to say, God, give me some wisdom to make the right choice? He has the power and the ability to do that. Today, if we can help you in any way, today, if you need to become a Christian, if you need to be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, today would be a great day to do that. I mean, wow, today would be an awesome day to do that, right? I mean, we're ready. If you're ready, we're ready. If we can pray with you or for you, if we can do whatever we can do to help you, we'd love to do it as we stand and sing.